Hello and welcome back to the Orlando Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Russ, and today's episode is the worst things about Walt Disney World one. So you've probably seen the title of this one and gone, this feels awfully negative for us. In terms of the Orlando Adventures podcast, this is a place for positivity, and the worst part of Disney certainly doesn't feel like that. Well, I know what you mean. And to be honest with you, like I'm a positive guy. As you've probably got the vibes off me by now. I'm a totally positive guy. So I don't want to get into that too much, but kicking it off, the worst thing about Walt Disney World one is leaving Disney. It's the worst. It's the worst part of it. And to be honest with you, that pretty much wraps up this episode. So I appreciate you all listening, and I'll speak to you all in the next one. I'm absolutely joking. I'm absolutely joking. But I wanted to start with that one. I wanted to start with the worst part about Walt Disney World in Orlando is the fact that you have to go home. Like genuinely, and you've all had this. You've all had the Disney blues. You've all had this absolute elation when you book your holiday, when you're in the build up to it, when you finally get there. When you finally get there, it is one of the best feelings in the world. Genuinely, when you go under the kind of banner that says welcome to Walt Disney World, or when you walk down Main Street for the first time, when you see the Epcot ball, when you see the Tree of Life, when you see Tower of Terror, all of these things and seeing these sights and sounds, genuinely it is special. And I say this a lot, it is genuinely magical. It really, really is. So the fact that we have to go home at some point. We all, fortunately or unfortunately, we live in, a lot of us live in the UK, so we live quite away from Orlando. We live a long way from the parks, and to get there, it can be a bit of an ordeal. We might save up for years to go and do this trip, and this trip for a lot of people is a trip of a lifetime. And genuinely, I know that we all joke about this a lot, saying that it is the trip of a lifetime, but it's the trip of a lifetime that we end up doing over and over again. I feel ever so fortunate. I genuinely do. I feel so fortunate that I've been able to go multiple times. Like, there are people out there who unfortunately might not ever do this trip. And genuinely, for me to be able to say that I've been 7 times, like, I feel so fortunate, because a lot of those trips I've gone with my parents, like, and I genuinely feel so grateful for that. And growing up, obviously now I'm older, I can take myself on these trips, and again, I feel fortunate enough that I'm in a position that I can do that. And so let's not get that misconstrued. Let's not miss that kind of point, if you know what I mean. But the thing is, and like, everyone knows this, genuinely, that going home bit it's so sad. And we've all done it. We've all done that thing where we've kind of like had your last day in the park, and you've had such a good day, but the moment you kind of are at the point of, well, should we leave the park, it's quite sad, and you're walking out of the park and you kind of turn around for the last time, you look at the castle or whatever else, and it hits you in the feels a little bit. It really does, because there's been such a build up. And that's the thing with these Orlando trips, there's always such a build up to this trip, that eventually, when unfortunately you've got to say goodbye to it for now, it really is. It's a bit of a moment. I will be honest, and it will get me every time. It always will, because of that appreciation, because of that genuine love for this thing that we all share a passion for, being Orlando. And the memories you make going on your own, or with a partner, with your family, with your kids, with your parents, with other family members, with friends, like, genuinely, some of the memories that you make from these holidays is the best memories that you will make in your life. So, for me to be an advocate for, if I'm campaigning for everyone to go to Orlando, genuinely, it is the greatest place on earth, in my opinion. I think it is absolutely spectacular. And to anyone who is considering going, I will do whatever it takes to get people there, because once people are there, you get it. You just get it. You understand, and you get what this hype is, and what we're all going on about, and what it is, and why we all keep going back, because it really is so unique and something absolutely spectacular and different to anywhere else on planet Earth. So that's my first kind of point with regards to, unfortunately, the worst things about Disney. And this, some of this list will be a little ironic, don't get me wrong. Some of these things, I'm not going to go and start bashing anything. That ain't happening. That isn't me, and that's not what this is about. What this is about is discussing the things that maybe don't go as well or aren't as good as what we maybe perceive they're going to be. But a lot of these things we have an effect and an impact on actually happening. So as you'll see as I get into this kind of list, you'll see what I mean. But for me, the worst part about Disney is when you got to go home. And kind of off the back of that, the kind of the next thing in addition to that is the fact that we live so far away. So for us to go and do this trip, obviously it's a big and it's an expensive trip. And the reason why is because it's such a long way away. And we've got to go and jump on a flight, and we've got to jump on a long flight for that. It's not like we're getting on a boat, we're not getting on a short flight, we're not, or whatever else. We're getting on a big long transatlantic flight to Orlando, and that outbound flight is best part of like 11 hours. So that can be a downside. It really can be a negative, and that's not even just a negative for Disney. That's a negative for like going to the United States, because the reality is the geography is that it's a long way away. So if you're not mad on flying, that can be a real negative, and I fully get that. And the fact that it might put some people off even going entirely, or it certainly makes people feel really, really anxious about going and doing this trip because of the flight. Sadly, I'm fine with flying. Like I'm fortunate enough in that respect that I'm fine with flying. But I know not everybody is, so it certainly is something to consider. But like all I can say, and I know I've only ever gone with Virgin, but I can only say amazing stuff about Virgin, and all the other airlines will be the same. But Virgin, especially from my perspective, give you such a great service. I think of going on like European flights on like a Ryanair or an EasyJet, and they're basic, and that's what you pay for. That's what you get. You get what you pay for. They're basic. Okay, you don't get a lot, but with Virgin, at least you're getting what feels like more of an experience. It certainly feels more premium. It feels like you're getting certainly more kind of bang for your buck in terms of what you're paying for. It's a nicer plane. You've got like the staff are obviously top tier. They're sensational. The food on the flight, I've never had an issue with plain food. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like you'll find this out on the vlogs. I'll eat the lot. I don't care. Like I'm all for it. When we get to the vlogs, when I eventually do a vlog series, you'll all see. Like it doesn't matter if Annie doesn't finish hers, I'm all over it. Give me a lot. I'll take it. Give me that half dry bread roll, and I'll stick it in my mouth full and try and eat it. I don't care. Like I'm all for it. I'll try and eat anything. But yeah, so that would be my second thing. The fact that unfortunately Disney World is such a long way away, but there's not a lot we can do about that. There's really not. So that is one of those things. The only thing we can do is just try and go with airlines that are going to make this experience better. And I know that can come with a cost as well. So I fully get that. The next thing, and let's just get this one off the list because we all know it. We all know it. It's expensive. One of the worst things about Disney is it is expensive. It's an expensive holiday. The tickets to get in the park, they are expensive. Let's not beat around the bush. And again, this isn't a negative. This is an observation. It is an expensive trip. It is a fact. They are the best. They are certainly one of the best companies in the world at marketing. And they get us every time. They get us so bad. Like, and I'm talking about things like gift shops and merch. Like, we go there and we go and have a look at stuff, and we're like just kind of mooching around a shop, and before you know it, you're like $80 deep in a lounge fly or a Spirit jersey, or you've got to have the ears to match the lounge fly, or to match the Spirit jersey, or to whatever else you want or need. We're talking about mugs, cups, like all this kind of stuff. They are absolutely top tier at advertising and marketing any form of merch. We are a sucker for it. We absolutely are. Me included in that. Okay, so like I'm looking at behind me. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I've got the Coke, the like Coke bottle from Galaxy's Edge. Like, so that's a full sugar Coke bottle because I thought it looked best. I never, and I categorically, I don't even like it. I never drink like full sugar Coke, but I wanted that bottle because I wanted it to kind of put up somewhere at home. And obviously it's ended up being kind of in my backdrop of the podcast. But like, I don't know how much I paid for that, probably like $7, $8, but for like a free and for basically a can of Coke. And the worst thing is I drank it because I was like, I really don't like wasting anything. So I didn't even want it and I drank it. Yeah. They got me. They got me hard on that one. And I had to refrain from buying the Diet Coke and the Sprite ones as well in the end, because I was like, you know what, I kind of want these for my displays or whatever. And then I think Annie kind of like got me back in line and was like, you don't need these, and I want them. But yeah, so you all know what it's like. That like we are a sucker for it. And to be fair, in terms of the worst things about Disney being that it is expensive, it's a fair point. It is a fair point. Like, unfortunately, it is a lot of money, and sometimes I will say it is a little bit of a negative because it can price people out of even going, which I think is really sad, because I think it's one of these things that I want everyone to experience Disney because I get so much joy from it. I think it's so wonderful that I want everybody to experience how good this is. So, you know, if we take that as a negative, then fair enough. But at the same time, what I will say is that I'm aware of how much things cost. I'm aware of the fact that I'm going to go there and I'm going to go and buy stuff in the shops. Plan for it. That's the only thing I can say to kind of get around that. If you plan for it and know that this is a more expensive trip, then plan for it. There are ways around making it slightly cheaper. And like, if you can do everything you can to counteract that, cool. Like, save yourself a bit of money, go out for a few extra meals or whatever way you do it. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not the cheapest trip in the world. Let's be real on that. Next thing, and kind of off the back of that as well, is with Disney, you do need to be fairly kind of literate with regards to using your smartphone. So you need to be able to understand how like the Disney Experience app works. You need to understand how to do things like virtual queues, how to do things like the new lightning lane system, which I'll be honest, I still haven't 100% got my head around. It scares me a little bit. I want to do an episode on it, but it scares me. It scares me I'm going to get it wrong. So anyone, and to be fair, I've had a few of you ask me, and I really do want to do it, but I'm terrified about telling you the wrong information because I really don't want you to go out there thinking you're going to be getting a lightning lane for something off the back of me saying it, and then it turns out you can't do it. Yeah, I kind of want to experience it firsthand before I can like really tell you like 100%. This is categorically how it works. I'm a kind of hands-on kind of guy with learning stuff. So I like if I experience it myself, then cool. But yeah, you've got to be fairly literate. Like I said, unfortunately, like when we went in October, and I appreciate it was still in like the Genie Plus kind of era. Like, if I told my parents about this, they would have been like, what? Why do I need an app? Like, when we used to go, I had a paper ticket. I'm like, no, you don't have a paper ticket anymore. It's on your app. And like, I'm having to set up things like Apple Pay or Apple Wallet on their phones, which they don't have because they have no interest in it, to get their ticket on their phone. Like, you know, things like this. And I'm sure there are ways around it, but like, for it to be the most simple way possible, you need to be able to utilize the Disney app for the best experience. And to be fair, once your head's around it, spot on. Love it. I think it's a really good setup. I think it's fantastic having all of your stuff in one place with regards to the app. I know you can do things like mobile checkout, stuff like that using the Disney app. Spot on. Love it. I'm all for it. I'm all for the technology. I just want to get my head around how to use it. And some people will take it as a negative. Some people will certainly take it as, unfortunately, not the best aspects of Disney, because you ultimately have to learn. You have to go out there and do research before you go out to the parks, which is fine. But not for everyone. Kind of off the back of that as well, I mentioned things like the virtual queue. So the virtual queue you're going to have for things like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. You're going to have it for Tron. I'm trying to think if there's another one. There might be. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, anyway, you are going to have this virtual Kiana's is the other one. I think that's on there as well. And I understand why they do it, because they want to try and control crowd levels, so you haven't got this massive 2-hour queue in a park. You've all got certain return times for these certain rides. I get it. I understand it, and I'm not against it by any means. I think it's actually a good idea. However, what I'm not mad on is the fact that you do need to be waking up at kind of like 7 a.m. in the morning, refreshing your page as quickly as possible to click to get a return time on a ride you might not even get. So I obviously had that experience and didn't get the return time, which is hugely frustrating. And basically being told by Disney that I essentially cannot go on this ride, despite the fact that at 3 seconds past 7 in the morning, I've tried to click on a virtual queue, but haven't been able to get in on it. That can be annoying. Like, I fully get that. The other caveat to that as well, the kind of to follow on from that, what I will say is a little bit of a downside is the fact that you can do that, then get a return time for, I don't know, 1:30. Your day, to me, my day feels fairly dictated to as to how I'm going to do my day around that return time, which in effect can get pushed back as well. So I may plan to try and go on this ride at 1:30, but it may end up getting pushed back to 3:30 throughout the day. You know, it's a bit of a snowball. It's a bit of a unfortunate situation where it's not kind of set in stone, and I know that that's how Disney they basically advertise it like that, that it's all subject to change, subject to cancellation, all this kind of stuff. I'm just talking from a standard, I want to get on this ride, it can be a little annoying. But what I will say is I like the idea of virtual queue. I think it's a good idea. I like the idea of kind of having rides lined up. I've talked before about like the Tapu Tapu system in Volcano Bay. I actually like it. I think it's good because you can tap onto a ride. It says your return time's an hour. So instead of standing in a queue for an hour, I can go around the park and I can go and look at stuff and I can go and experience different things. I can go and grab something to eat. I can go and get a drink. I can go and have a little sit down somewhere. Then I can come back to the ride and do a short queue to get in it. Short queue. That's what I will say. A short queue, if I then go back to it and it's a 10-minute queue, cool. However, if I go back to it and then I queue 45 minutes for it, I'm a little bit like, well, what have I virtual queued for? Do you know what I mean? This is my only little bugbear with the virtual queue system. So whether it's a bad thing, or I would certainly say that it's another consideration aspect that you certainly need to know about prior to going to Orlando. From that, if we're talking about kind of crowds, let's talk about another thing that potentially is one of the worst aspects of Walt Disney World, and it is the crowds. Again, let's be real on this. It's busy. Disney is busy. Disney's busy because we love it. Disney's busy because we are suckers for how good this is. So we're the ones shouting about it to everybody else. And then it gets busier because we're all talking about it. So I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love seeing a park that's full of kind of like full of life, full of people. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, and you wouldn't have had this in Disney, because Disney are an absolute beast with regards to keeping a park busy. I've had it in, I was going to say I've had it in Universal Studios, not as much. I think of like a UK park. I've been to like Fort Park, for example, Alton Towers, midweek on, I don't know, like middle of September, when kids are back at school, midweek, it's a bit grey. And you go there and genuinely it feels like there's about 4 people in the park. There's not a lot of atmosphere going on. Okay. So in fairness to Disney, they have done an incredible job at making these parks busy and feel busy and keep people coming all year round. Like, absolute props to them for doing it. It's amazing. But crowd levels can be high. And I will say that it is one of the worst parts, because not everybody can cope with crowds. So let's just like take aside the fact that, oh, I want to get on this ride as quick as possible. Like, that is what it is. You're in a theme park. You are going to have to queue for stuff. Let's get over that. But what I will say is not everybody can necessarily cope with crowds from a mental point of view as well. Like being in close proximity with people while you're trying to watch kind of Happily Ever After or whatever, like can be a downfall. It certainly can, and it can put people off. This is what I'm kind of trying to get at. It's not for everyone in that respect, because unfortunately not everybody can enjoy the experience because of how busy it might be. Disney are brilliant. They have got ways around it. There are potentially other viewing areas you can go and watch some of these shows and attractions. Obviously, with regards to like rides, some of the actual queue lines might be quite claustrophobic. So again, these are considerations, but I'm certainly not saying that the queue lines are the worst parts of Disney, because they're not. I think that the queue lines are actually sensational. But I will say that crowd levels can be, you could get unlucky, and like in any theme park. So it's not just like exclusive to Disney, but one of the worst points is that unfortunately you could go there on a day where it just so happens to be unbelievably busy. Obviously, if you turn up to a theme park, it's unbelievably busy and you get on free rides. If you've paid best part of £100 for your ticket to get in there and you've done free rides, you may feel a little aggrieved that you haven't got good value for money. I think that's fair to say. I don't think that's necessarily negative. I think, again, we're talking fact here. We're talking, it's not ideal, but with that being said, there are ways to plan around it. I appreciate there's ways to plan around it in terms of spending money, so you can go and do things like Lightning Lane. But at the same time, I've spoke about this in things like my itinerary episode and other episodes as well. If you are smart enough, clever enough to get to parks for early, kind of like either early opening with regards to depending on what resorts you're at and stuff, or get there for rope drop, you can get past a lot of these crowd issues. You can manage crowd issues by doing busy things at quiet times of day, planning your day a bit better. So this is one of these where there's definitely a way around it. There's definitely influence that we can have as people actually going to enjoy these parks that can make crowd levels better. Another worst part about Walt Disney World, and again, this isn't necessarily exclusive to Disney. Rides break. Unfortunately, rides do break, they go down. And if you are in the queue and you've queued for a ride for a long time, or even worse, you've queued for a ride for a long time, you get on the ride and then it breaks down. Oh, it's annoying. Oh, it is frustrating. And what I will say is you just need to remember sometimes, like, we all get annoyed. We'll get we can get a bit grouchy or a bit grumpy because we've queued for something for 75 minutes and then it breaks down. You get that announcement over the kind of tannoy and it says, unfortunately, this ride has broken down. And like, some people get really frustrated about it. And like, the only thing you can do is just try and stay a bit chilled. Unfortunately, it's not an ideal situation. It's not an ideal situation for anyone involved. It's certainly not an ideal situation for Disney. They do not want a ride to go down. It is not in their interest, and it certainly is not the fault of a cast member. So absolutely, categorically, to anyone, and I'm telling you off here, if you've ever moaned at a cast member, it is not their fault. So please don't do that. Okay, like, obviously, if you've had a bad experience, report it to customer services, but like, don't get funny with the person who's at the desk. It's not their fault. Like, they are representing the company. So by all means, voice your disappointment or displeasure, but don't take it out on a cast member. Please don't do that. But yeah, unfortunately, stuff breaks down. Okay, and it is a negative of the day if it ever happens. Some people may be fortunate; it may have never happened to them. But if you have been on a ride and it's broke down, it's a pretty soul destroying moment when you've queued for something for a while. But you know what? Go into any theme park. It doesn't matter if it's Disney, it doesn't matter if it's Universal, Thorpe Park, Alton Towers, wherever else it may be. These things happen. They're not ideal. there are technical difficulties, and if the ride isn't running, it'll be probably because they are trying to make sure it is safe for you to ride. Bear that in mind. That's Russ's telling off to everyone who's ever moaned about something, and I moan as well. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not this happy, chilled guy at every single minute of the day. Sometimes I get frustrated with stuff, like anyone does. But yeah, lesson learned. There's a moral to this story, and it's don't moan at the cast members because it's not their fault. Next, worst thing about Disney. Again, not exclusive to Disney, but one of the worst things about Disney is the weather. Okay. And it's, again, funnily enough, weather is not exclusive to Disney World, but you are going on holiday to Orlando, and be rest assured it is hot. And at times it can be too hot. It really, really can. So if you have gone unprepared for such weather, then I hold less sympathy than the people who have gone being as prepared as possible. So unfortunately, sometimes you can go to these parks and it is deadly hot. If you are going kind of this time of year, kind of August, it can be like high 30s at times. And it'll be high 30s, feels like 45 or something silly like that. And unfortunately, in some of the parks, the shade situation is not the best. And that is what it is, but plan for it. So, and I think of two places. I think of there's certainly two places that come to my mind. The French part of World Showcase in Epcot, I explicitly remember the France section being no shade whatsoever. So be aware that, like, if it's hot, and you want to get in some shade, just try and plan to not be in that area of the park, or at least move on from it. Don't just like stand around in this area getting beaten by the heat and then wonder why you then feel dehydrated. The other place, as we've spoke about before, which is categorically the hottest place on earth, is Toy Story Land. Obviously, that is a bit of a creative error when they made this land, that they really didn't put any shade in anywhere. So that obviously, you know, that is exclusive to Disney, being Toy Story Land, and with regards to like World Showcase as well. But all I can say is just try and plan for it. Like, know that these areas are hot, but plan to like either have fans, have drinks, have a plan to even not be in that area of the park at the middle of the day, or plan to move on from that area of the park quickly. Don't just sit around like basically giving yourself heat stroke. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. So that is a consideration. The flip side of the hot weather, because the hot weather, like I said, it can be really hot, and it can absolutely drain you. It can wipe your day. It really can. So be prepared for it. The flip side is that in Orlando and in Florida, it rains. And I've spoke about this in the Florida weather one. It rains, and when it does rain, it rains. It rains hard. So again, be prepared for it, and don't be upset if you haven't looked at the weather at any point and you turn up to Magic Kingdom and you're over at Big Thunder Mountain or something like that, and then it gets shut because there's lightning in the area, for example. Like, don't be disappointed or confused as to why that happens, because it does happen. So you do need to expect it or plan for it. Like I've said before, basically, if you look at the weather and plan your holiday a little bit, like if you look at the weather in like today's Sunday, and you're looking at going to a park tomorrow, but unfortunately it says that it's going to rain for certain times of the day, but the rest of the week looks dry. Well, let's try and plan for it. Let's not go to a park tomorrow that has like big roller coasters and loads of stuff outside that potentially might get closed. Let's go to a park that has more indoor attractions, for example. Like, so it can be one of the most frustrating things in Orlando, the weather. Like trying to deal with the hot weather and then the wet weather as well. It can be frustrating. It really can. So by no means like rest on it. Don't think that you're just going to go on holiday and it's just going to be comfortable, because it at times it isn't. So That's what I will say. I will say that that is certainly a consideration to at least have in the back of your mind. Plan for it, and it isn't really an issue. It's just not. But don't plan for it, and then you might have a slightly more miserable time of it. That's all I can say. I've got a couple more points on my worst parts about Disney one, and the next one, and this is a little bit similar to the one of the first points I made about ultimately the parks being expensive, and my point is that food and drink is expensive. Okay, and ultimately you're in a theme park, so you're burning a lot of calories by walking around, and you're hot, so you're sweating more, and you're getting dehydrated quicker because of the warm weather, so you are going to need to drink more, but you're burning more energy, so you might want to eat more. Also, like I said at the beginning, they're amazing at advertising things, so they have amazing themed treats and snacks and foods and stuff like that kind of draw us in. Unfortunately, some of them are quite expensive. So again, let's plan for it, like plan for maybe sharing meals or eating kids' meals, or just save up before you go as well is the other thing, or try and remain restrained from buying every single snack that you see. If it's not in the budget, go to places like Walmart and take a picnic with you is another example of a way you can counteract having to just buy food in the parks. But I will say that the food in there, it is expensive. Okay, let's like again, let's not beat around the bush. It is expensive for food and drink. However, the quality of food in Disney, I will say, is exceptional. I personally believe that the food in the Disney parks is really, really good. So I don't often feel aggrieved or kind of downhearted for spending the money on the food in there, because I actually feel that the value for money is still fairly strong. I feel like the quality kind of backs up the price potentially at some points in time. So just plan if you can, like take food with you, or just be a bit more refrained, or just have treats as treats, not like don't pick up every single thing you see. And I know that there's this kind of want to go and like eat and drink around the world and stuff in Epcot, and that honestly can become a really expensive task to do. But plan for it. Like if that's what you're planning on doing, then cool. If you're going with a group of friends, like get some of these things and like share them between you. If it's just a case of you want to try them, then that's another option you can do. So that is just a consideration to have. And my final point coming off the back of that one is I personally don't think that there's maybe enough places to sit in these parks that isn't in restaurants and kind of like designated dining areas. So I feel like if you've gone and bought quick service, or you've gone and bought like food in a restaurant, then obviously you've got seating. But if you have gone there with just like your little picnic, I feel like there's not as much. There's kind of it's not set up for those people as much, which obviously they're not going to do. They're doing it so that you do go and spend your money there, which is understandable. They're a business. But I will say that sometimes it is nice to just like have places to sit. I know that quite a lot of people you'll see like end up sitting around in like the walkways and like the paths and stuff, because there potentially isn't that many places to sit around the park. There's a lot of people in the park, so sometimes there's not enough places to potentially go and just kind of relax for a minute. It is, again, it's one of those. I think it certainly is kind of a consideration to have. I think it is certainly it makes an impact on your day. Like obviously, you know what it's like. If you're hot, you're thirsty, or you're hungry or whatever, and you just want to go and sit down for a minute, and you just can't find anywhere to sit, it can be a bit of a dampener on your day. So I think that's probably fair. And I do have one more point. I have one more to round this one off. And I would be, again, as ever, I'd be fairly remiss if I didn't mention this one. But for me, one of the worst, if not the worst thing, unfortunately, about Disney World is that they don't have the Marvel MCU stuff in Orlando. It pains me. Like, trust me, as you would have all heard me talk about an awful lot, I love the stuff over at Universal. but I'm an MCU fan, and as much as I love Doctor Doom and I love the Hulk and the Spider-Man ride, I'd rather they were in Disney. I'd rather they were in Disney themed to the MCU. That's where I stand on it. I want more Marvel stuff. I really do. I want to be able to kind of go to Avengers Campus in Orlando, but unfortunately not. So that is a negative. For me, that is a negative of Disney. We're all fortunate enough that Universal still hold it over there, so there is a Marvel presence. But in terms of the content that I maybe want, I don't necessarily have over there. So that would be probably my big one. That would be my other than going home. Sadly, my big one would be the lack of MCU presence in Walt Disney World. So that is all of my points. That's all of the points that I came up with. I hope this has been a bit of a fun episode. I hope it's been a little bit different as well. Like I said at the start, I don't want this to come across as negative. I don't want this to be like a Russ bashing Walt Disney World one. Like that's not what this is. What this is pointing out these points that people will make that potentially aren't the most fun aspects of your trip to Orlando, and potentially they are aspects that we either are out of our hands, but some of them actually we do have an impact on. So I've tried to give you the kind of flip side of it to what the solution is to these potential bad points about Disney as well. So thank you once again for listening. I appreciate all of you so much as ever. Genuinely, please, 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 if you've listened to this episode, tag me on Instagram and share it, because I'll always share it back. It makes my day every time. And genuinely, I love communicating with you all. So thank you again. And I will speak to you all in the next one.